this video, I'm going to take you through 4 key design principles that you can apply to any communication you create. That could be a presentation, newsletter, email, or even a document. And by applying these design principles, you will enhance your communication, making it more attractive to the reader, as well as helping them to understand your information quickly and accurately. So let's get started.
Design principle number 1 is alignment. So we're all pretty familiar with alignment, particularly with respect to text. But when we talk about alignment within a composition, we mean alignment of all the elements, irrespective of the distance between them. So this could include text, images, diagrams, so on. And there should be a common way that you are aligning these elements within your communication. So alignment is really important for creating an invisible connection between elements so that nothing feels out of place. But more importantly, it creates order and helps the reader navigate through your composition and avoids a haphazard effect. Let's take a look at an example. So in this document, to the right-hand side, you can see that a lot of alignment has been used. I can actually draw a straight line down here, and everything in this section is aligned. All these icons have been aligned in the center. All the text is aligned. And if we go onto the right-hand side of this document, there is alignment between all the boxes, all the icons, and all the text. Now, this might seem really straightforward, but you'd be surprised at the amount of content I see where this has not been done. And I'm not saying that you have to align everything to the left like in this example, but you have to have a rule around how you've placed objects on your screen. So for example, if you wanted these to have a tiled effect going down, that's fine, but you want the distance between each block to be the same. Principle number 2 is proximity. So if you've ever studied psychology, you might be aware of Gestalt principles, of which proximity is one. And these principles relate to how we perceive information. And when we see information close to each other, it implies a relationship. What that means is that things that are close together, we assume to be related to each other, and the things that are far away, we see as unrelated. So when you're designing a communication, you should group related information together, as this helps organize information and enable the reader to find information quickly. So let me give you an example. So if we have a look at a fairly standard resume, you'll see that all the information has been grouped together. So on the left-hand side, you've got contact information, skills, education, and then on the right-hand side, you have a bit of a profile and then the professional experience. So that might seem really straightforward. Of course, you're going to group that type of information together. But I want to highlight how information has been grouped even within those sections. So for example, down in education, you can see that both of the degrees have more proximity and are closely aligned with all the information relating to that particular degree. And similarly, on the right-hand side, you can see that all the information relating to this position is in close proximity to each other, and the second position has information all closely related to each other. So what proximity creates is this visual perception of separate chunks of information. And so you can easily see that under professional experience, straight away there's 2 positions. Because what proximity is also achieving by grouping information together is more white space. So you can see that there is quite a decent gap between the profile and the professional experience. So you can see that's 2 distinct sections. The same as between the contact skills and skills in education. But further than that, you also see that there is a space between the education and the position titles, making it really clear that there's distinct chunks of information. So at a really quick glance, you can see that there's 2 degrees that they've completed, and there's also 2 positions on this page. So let me compare this to a couple of examples where proximity hasn't been used as effectively. So here you can see that there is far less white space between the information and the sections. So what happens here is that all this information is crammed together, and it's much harder to navigate through that information and to easily see where the information starts and ends. If we take a look at the opposite end of the spectrum, which also can happen, too much space has been added. So how we start to visually perceive this information is very different to the other two. It starts to look like there's many more sections, and it's hard to tell that all this information here is related because visually we take in this position title to be a separate element to the company, which is also a separate element to the text describing that particular position. So it becomes very hard to follow where the information starts and ends because we're visually taking it in as multiple sections. Design principle number 3 is contrast. So contrast is really important for creating emphasis and impact. But in particular, you can use it to create a hierarchy with your information to guide your reader through your communication, highlighting what you want them to notice first, second, and so on. So there's a number of ways that we can create contrast. We can do it through color, type, scale, location. But the main thing with contrast is you want to make it obvious. Contrast is created when two things are really different, not slightly different. So just make sure that you are creating enough contrast between your elements. Otherwise, they can end up looking like mistakes. So let's take an example. So within this product, there is contrast, but I want to highlight what I think could also be improved. So first of all, it has a very bold logo at the top. This is done really well. This brand would be easily recognizable. So at this point, I think the contrast just falls off and I don't think it's utilized enough. If you look at the rest of the text, it is all the same type and it has a very similar point size. As I said before, you want to create a hierarchy. So what order do you want people to read your content in? So for this product, I would suggest the most important thing is they know what the product is, what it does, and potentially what it does not contain, because that could be something really important for the buyer. So I really feel that the product type needs to be highlighted more. All this body text here can be reduced in size because it's something that you would want them to read post understanding what the product is, what it does, and what it does not do. And additionally, the website I would reduce significantly because people would look for that information later, but it's not something that you want for them to be considering right up front. So that's the main thing to consider. What do you want people to look at and in what order, and highlight that information and use contrast so that it's highlighted in that way. The last design principle is repetition. So repetition is really important because it creates familiarity and association, strengthening your design. But I think it's particularly important to enable quicker recognition and understanding. Say you're creating a document and throughout there are some key points you want to highlight. Highlighting them in the same way will ensure much quicker recognition for your reader. Repetition can be achieved through a number of ways, including type, color, images, elements, shape, stroke weight, alignment, essentially any way you format your information. But repetition doesn't have to be boring. Take this presentation. Every slide looks different, but through repetition of color, typography, imagery, and shapes, it looks similar throughout and obviously comes from the same presentation. If you have something that is not as visual as this, say a document you're creating, you can still apply repetition to the individual elements, such as sticking with the same font, repeating colors and bullet types throughout your document. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did and want to learn more about design, make sure you hit the subscribe button below. Over the next few weeks, I'll be releasing a video series showing you exactly how I apply these principles. So if you don't want to miss out on that, make sure you hit the bell below and you'll be notified once they are available. And of course, if you have any questions on what I've shown you or a particular question about design in general, please add them to the comment section below.